Hey, what's up? It's Mr. Dean, and finally we have made it to the end of our Mario Kart retrospective. Well, until we hopefully get another Mario Kart game, of course. And what a showstopper of an ending, because with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, we have 96 tracks to rank. Unlike the other rankings, there were so many tracks that I decided to split these up into different tiers based on how much I like them. Also, I am not at all in the competitive community for this game, so this is from the point of view of a casual player. Definitely don't take this list too seriously. Also, this is going to be an unhealthily large dose of my opinion, so buckle up. And with that being said, let's get right into the ranking because oh man, this video is going to be a long one. Now, starting off the list, there aren't a lot of tracks in the game I genuinely just do not like, so F tier will only consist of 5 tracks. With that being said, f***ing Twisted Mansion. I feel like I just do not see an adequate amount of disdain for this track at all. For one thing, this one is an absolute nightmare to play on 200cc. 200 isn't like a huge factor in this list, but if a track does a stellar job at pissing me the fuck off on 200cc, then I absolutely will be obliged to bring that up. Aside from that, the visuals of this track I always found to be probably the weakest in all of the base game. Obviously the track isn't ugly by any stretch. I mean, in any section that isn't the underwater section, I think it looks great. The underwater section though. Am I the only one that finds this section just really drab and ugly? I think it's just the way they went for an entirely brick texture and everything looks almost the same. It just has always looked so boring in comparison to the rest of the track. Honestly, this underwater section unironically is probably the biggest reason this is in last place for me. I hate this section so much. Now, to say something positive, the final turn of the track is cool. I like these night obstacles where boos pop out, it's pretty cute. Unfortunately, that isn't enough to make up for the rest of the track just really leaving a bad taste in my mouth. And yet another base game track that I had absolutely zero problem putting this far down on the list, GCN Dry Desert. Where do I even begin with this one? Am I the only person that prefers this on Double Dash? Visually in the original, all the trees and hills in the background had little eyes on them, and now while it looks better graphically, it is just kind of missing that level of charm. This was no amazing track in the original version, but compared to how much of an upgrade the rest of the retros in this game got, this one is just really boring. Now, I will concede that on 200cc, I sometimes enjoy this track a little bit as a guilty pleasure. That is the one nice thing I will say about this one. They added an Oasis section, and this has been mentioned before, but the track has dry in the name, so that's kind of stupid. I can't use this too heavily against the track since Dry Ruins had a tiny lake in Mario Kart Wii, and I love that track, but still. Overall, the layout for this track is an improvement over Twisted Mansion, but at the very least, that track had personality to it, so it kind of balances out. There really isn't much separating these two. Time to get started on the onslaught of Tour City tracks in this game. The internet pretty much unanimously decided that Tokyo Blur is the worst one, and yeah, I agree. I really don't want to hate on tracks in this video because everyone else hates on them, but this is a case where I just share the same opinions as everyone else. This is bar none the most boring out of all the tour tracks and probably the entire game. For obstacles we have thwomps and that's it, have at it. It is especially gut punching that for a city as sprawling and iconic as Tokyo, this is all we got. I mean, I think this one looks mediocre visually, like it's good enough, there's just nothing really going on. The races also just go by so quickly, especially on 200cc. It has been said before, but Blur in the name really has heavy meaning to it with how fast the race goes. There is nothing really offensively bad about this track to me, but that's also kind of the problem. This is just really a nothing track. On to the next pick. Mario Kart Tour strikes again, Madrid Drive Time. Now this track is the embodiment of the problems I have with the city tracks overall to me. The layout is just so unintuitive. At least the music is pretty good and it has a lot more personality than Tokyo Blur, but I would be lying to you if I said I get any kind of enjoyment that I get out of the vast majority of tracks in this game from this one. Once again, visually this track looks fine, I guess. At least we actually got a lot of references to the city of Madrid and it doesn't feel completely lifeless to look at. Alright, hopefully we can just take a breather and get a break from the city tracks. Okay, never mind, Berlin Byways. Same stuff that I said in the last ranking. The layout for this one is very unnatural feeling for a Mario Kart game, especially on 200cc. The amount of wall bonks I had on 200 here was despicable. As for why I put this one above the other two, not much to be honest. Okay, to be fair, at parts this one does look good visually, especially the sections with water everywhere. Don't know if that opinion is shared with the internet, and I don't care either. The layout of this track is once again just too mind-numbingly annoying to get it out of the F tier purgatory purgatory. Also, now all of a sudden there are cars on the road, which for the first few times I didn't even realize there were cars, which speaks to how little of an impact they made for me. I appreciate the attempt at artificially making the race more interesting, it just didn't really do much to spice things up. Finally though, it is time to make our leap up to D tier, where hopefully I can be less negative overall. Toad's Turnpike, what have they done to you? If I didn't enjoy this one on 200 so much, this would definitely be bottom tier. This remake is at the very least pretty to look at, and the music is still cool, but 150C is so boring. It honestly feels uncomfortable to drift on this one, the turns are so annoyingly slow. This is weird since some other tracks in this game also have incredibly long turns, but for some reason it is here in particular where it really bugs me. I will say I like how some of the cars have ramps over them, or even a glider ramp. That was a fun addition to the track. Also, the anti-gravity sections do let you avoid the traffic areas too. And like I said, on 200cc this track is actually difficult, which Toad's Turnpike is meant to be, so I appreciate playing it more on that mode. But overall, this is just a really drab remake of the original. I literally tweeted a few weeks ago about how Ice Ice Outpost is overhated. I then replayed the track for the making of this video, and yeah, I don't like the track, never mind. Now I do respect this track for being experimental. The entire track is built on two different sides of the same road being split apart, however I think it is too mild of an attempt at playing with this concept. On 200cc this track is more fun since the shroomless shortcuts are less practical to use, which is a good thing since those shortcuts I find really stupid. I admire what it was trying to do, it just unfortunately doesn't really stick the landing. It kind of annoys me how the entire internet hates on Sunset Wilds in this game for being a complete meltdown of the original version when this track exists. Sky Garden, I am so sorry, you did not deserve this. I am much more forgiving of Sunset Wilds, which I will get to, but here I find the track itself to not only be boring, but virtually not reflect the original whatsoever. It genuinely feels almost nothing like Sky Garden to me. If the music was not here, I would think that this is an entirely different track. The music is still as fire as always, but it almost feels wrong listening to it here. I really just have very little to say about this track. It isn't bad enough for F tier since I guess it's still somewhat fun to race on, but it's just one of those tracks that exist in this game and it's so unfortunate. I ran away from talking about the tour tracks as long as I could. Amsterdam Drift time. Now I actually like this track quite a bit visually since a lot of it takes place in grasslands and tulip fields, which is really nice looking to me. And we got some underwater action too. Okay, aside from that, it's once again horrendously boring to play on. The layout is just painfully mediocre, just like a majority of the city tracks. Next. Bangkok Rush. I really don't know what to say about these city tracks anymore that hasn't already been said. Just like Amsterdam Drift, I think that this one looks pretty cool as it goes for a nice sunset aesthetic. It's just once again, there are way too many questionable design choices for me to put it any higher than this position, and also with that we get into our C tier, and from here on out I at least like every track more than I dislike them. SNES Mario Circuit 3 comes in at number 86, and this is such a weird track to rank. Like, it isn't bad at all, I've always liked the layout since I think it gives really fun races. It's just, look at it. It's just so bland and uninspired, which is especially apparent from the makeovers that some of the other circuit tracks in this game got. Now my reasons for enjoying this track are entirely unrelated to the visuals, so this doesn't really bother me too much. And even then, I do like how they added some 3D Mario platforming related set pieces in the background, it's kinda cute. Also, I think that this track is pretty fun on 200cc, except for the one 180-degree turn, that one is a little obnoxious. And overall, this is just a really bizarre choice for Nintendo to bring back. We already had no shortage of circuit tracks, and this one had already been brought back as a retro. I don't mind it as much as other people do, but it's just kinda strange. I'm sure by now you may have been wondering where 3DS Toad Circuit was, since everyone loves to shit on that track in this game, and finally we have gotten to that inevitable moment in the video where I talk about 3DS Toad Circuit. To address the elephant in the room, yes, this track doesn't look that good. The grass texturing here is, well, non-existent. However, I think that the hate this track gets is a little overblown. For one thing, while this track looked better on the 3DS, I really don't mind the visuals that much here. Like, sure, they're overly cartoony and simplistic, but over time I've kind of gotten used to it, and I don't think it's hideous or anything, it's just not as good as the rest of the game. And the layout is good enough. It is very generic circuit track, but I still enjoy it. This and SNES Mario Circuit 3 really go hand in hand in this game for me. I could swap them on any given day. Now, I really don't know what to do with London Loop. It still suffers from tour track syndrome quite a bit, but I just marginally enjoy this one more than than all the others that preceded it. Over time, I think I've just kind of grown to like this one for whatever reason. I do like how the music for the track is a callback to British rock music, although it isn't quite as much of a standout as some of the other rock and metal songs in the soundtrack. This is still a solid track, I don't love it or hate it at all. Water Park comes in at number 83, and for one thing, very pretty track. I mean, basically every base game track is gorgeous, but just wanted to point out that this one is absolutely no exception. The music is also pretty fire. This is one I could totally see myself listening to while editing or working. It's just, the layout for this track is so painfully mediocre. It isn't bad, it's just not good. Like, the super long anti-gravity turn is a cool use of anti-gravity, but it just feels empty for some reason. I don't dislike this track at all, and on 200cc it's a different story. I mean, at least the music is good and it's really pretty to look at. Also, why is this track called Water Park? There is text that says Subcoaster above the entrance, which would have been a way cooler name. The Tour City tracks slowly rank up as we go through the list, as now we get to Los Angeles Laps. This one is helped a little bit by the fact that I am the most familiar with LA out of all the cities, and of course I have to talk about my favorite part of LA, the Inglewood oil fields. Why in the actual f*** is this the third lap? It's so f***ing stupid. It could have been so cool to drive in the mountains and by the Griffith Observatory, or by a rendition of the Hollywood sign, or just anything else. Help me help you, Nintendo, work with me here. Anyway, rant over, it's still a fun track. I needed something to complain about. Also, the music is fire. Number 81, we got GCN Baby Park, and I really did not know what to do with this track, so C tier it is. In Double Dash, this track was a classic with how bonkers the items were. The median didn't even stop items at all, so it was just a complete madhouse. In Mario Kart DS, the biggest travesty in gaming history took place. This remake should be a felony. They made the track 5 laps and it became so boring. And here, I mean, it's just kind of in the middle. Of course, visually this is a phenomenal remake. I love how they incorporated anti-gravity to make the road way more interesting to drive on. But as for the gameplay, it is mildly better than Mario Kart DS, I guess, but that isn't really saying much. I just feel like whenever I play this, I really have to be in the mood to enjoy it, otherwise I get annoyed. Of course, it's an iconic track and has made its place in Mario Kart history, however, I just cannot put it any higher than right here. Coming in at number 80, we got Rome Avanti from Mario Kart Tour, and I mean, the city tracks are definitely taking steps in the right direction. We still got our pervasive design flaws of the track, but aesthetically, I think that this one is really cool. Putting Rome in a nighttime aesthetic looks so good. I also love driving through the Colosseum. Everything else though is just okay. There isn't anything that's too notably bad to me or anything, it's just another city track with good visuals and the Colosseum. Breaking into our 70s, we got the remake of Royal Raceway from Mario Kart 64. Originally this track was extremely bland and long, and here it got a much deserved visual overhaul. The track also drives a lot better to make it flow more effectively. This doesn't mean I don't have my complaints though. Why in the actual f*** are we not allowed to drive up to Peach's Castle anymore? This isn't that big of a deal since it doesn't affect actual races. I just had to point out it's allergy season for fun, and Nintendo is having a big allergic reaction here. As for the track itself, it's a big improvement over the original. It's just I happen to still prefer a lot of the other tracks in this game. It looks and plays nice, just nothing spectacular. Drifting into number 78, we got SNES Rainbow Road, and this is definitely the definitive version of this track. I think it's cool how the ground shakes whenever the thwomps do their whole thwomp thing. Visually, this track also looks absolutely stunning. I love the retro look for the road. Now, the layout of this track is still just kind of basic as far as Rainbow Roads go. This just isn't one of my favorites, especially whenever we have 4 other Rainbow Roads in this game, and I happen to prefer all 4 of those since I have more fun on them. It's just unfortunate that it causes this one to land down here by association. Also, I do not like 200cc on this track at all. I mean, I feel like with a 90-degree base design like we got here, it's easy to see why that's the case. Now it's time to go right back into Tour City tracks with Sydney Sprint. I feel like my takes on these tour tracks has definitely got monotonous by this point, but they really all just kind of mesh together layout wise. Now we do have some fun Sydney related stuff like the Opera House, which I do like driving through it on multiple laps. Visually, I think that this is one of the more lively and upbeat looking cities, which I like as well. And of course, as per usual, the music is pretty fire. And once again, it's a city track, so I'm not really in love with the layout. Ever since Piranha Plant Cove came out in the Booster Course Pass, I've seen a lot of people love it, and I mean, it's good. I just really don't get the hype for the track to the extent that most people do. Visually this one looks good, but primarily in the underwater sections. Well, yes, that is almost the entire track. I find the above water sections to be kind of boring looking. The music is good and I think the track plays well, it just isn't one of my personal favorites or anything. Maybe over time it'll grow on me more though. I got bored of doing this ranking, so I decided to hop on Fall Guys to get my mind off of it. Just kidding, I just have to play Sky High Sunday for that. Jokes aside, this is another loop track, except it being filled with trick ramps, and I actually kind of like it. I used to not like the visuals being so overly saturated with color, but over time it has grown on me quite a bit. I don't completely love the track since something about it just feels off, particularly on 150cc, but I like it enough to warrant it being up to this point. It definitely has some character. Number 74, we got DS Shroom Ridge, which alongside 3DS Toad Circuit definitely doesn't look incredible. It doesn't look awful, it's just one of the more simplistic visual designs, which thankfully that is made up for with the gameplay. This track is pretty fun to play on, and of course the original song is an absolute banger. It still was one of the more basic and forgettable tracks in Mario Kart DS, and here that is no exception. Fun, but just not quite as memorable as a lot of the other selections here. I do like how they added the wind shortcuts at the end of the track though, and how you actually have to watch out for traffic whenever you use it. Speaking of traffic, this track is just difficult enough to make it fun and engaging to race on too, which I enjoy. Time for another dandy old Tour City track. This time we got Vancouver Velocity. This is another one of our nighttime city tracks, which I think, me personally, I normally find to look a bit cooler. I absolutely love the first lap of this track. Driving through the forest with anti-gravity actually is so cool to do, and then after that it's just okay. I mean, driving through the city looks cool, however, it just looks like a less cool Moonview Highway, which is also in this game, so there's that. Other than that, it just kind of feels like another city track to me personally. I have seen some people compare Sweet Sweet Canyon to Sugar Rush from Wreck-It Ralph, and after seeing the comparison, I just cannot get it out of my head. That isn't a diss of this track, it's just an observation. The track itself aesthetically looks cool, however, not one of my favorite base game tracks personally. However, it is also decently fun to play, so there isn't anything offensively bad here. I especially find this track pretty fun on 200cc. Also, this track has one of my personal favorite split path sections in the entire game. I don't know why, I just find this one to be really fun to drive on. Straight up, if 3DS Rock Mountain didn't have as much of a banger that it has for its song, then it definitely would have been considerably lower. Like, the track isn't bad, but its personality is derived from its music for me, like the rocking song is the heartbeat of the track. With that being said, it is incredibly fire, and it is one of my favorite songs from the entire game. The track itself is cool, but nothing exceptional. Once again, we got more cartoony visuals, which while they have grown on me, I prefer the original visually. I do still think the final incline straightaway is a lot of fun though, and it is pretty iconic. Now, if you had told me that Nintendo would add Coconut Mall to this game and it would be my least favorite Wii track in the game, I actually would have died laughing. But nope, this is a really disappointing remake to me. Now let's get the positives out of the way. The music is probably the best Mario Kart song of all time. It was in the original and it still is here. And the layout is still fun to race on. Maybe not as good as the original, but it's still Coconut Mall. Now my big gripes with this remake are two things: the visuals and the ending section. The visuals aren't bad, but I would much rather be looking at the Wii version. It just looks so much less lively here. I don't even really feel like I'm at a mall anymore. I complained about this in a Mario Kart 7 video too, but why the f did the escalators have arrows on them? And like, look at the parking lot at the end. You're telling me this is a shopping mall and there are like barely any visible cars at all? And the parked cars at the end don't feel nearly as intimidating as the original. It's still Coconut Mall layout wise. This is far from a bad track. It just feels like such a nothing remake to me that I couldn't put it above C tier, and it pains me to do that. Rainbow Road comes in at number 69, and somehow I find this Rainbow Road both overrated and underrated at the exact same time. This feels like one of those you either love it or you hate it tracks. I always see people online either saying this is a masterpiece or it is the plague. I think it is maybe slightly disappointing since the Mario circuit from this game felt crazier, but as a track it's still pretty fun. I appreciate how Nintendo went for a space station theme, and while I think it could have been done better, I respect the effort. This theming does make this Rainbow Road stand out among the rest of the Rainbow Roads in the series. The split path section is admittedly pretty cool too, since you can hop between each path, although I never really find myself doing that. And also the big final turn feels like a massive item death trap. This track does feel difficult too, especially on 200cc. And the music is very good too, so why is it not higher on the list if I keep saying all these positive things about it? It mainly boils down to the visuals for me. I would be lying if I said I loved the way this track looks. This honestly is probably my least favorite Rainbow Road in the whole series, barring the first few games visually, and I can't really pinpoint why aside from the excessive space station visuals. This is a good track that unfortunately is just not as strong as a multitude of the tracks in this game. Up next at number 68, we got Animal Crossing, which I've always liked this track, but I never really crossed the bridge to loving it. For one thing, I do really appreciate the fan service in this track. I am currently playing the original Animal Crossing through for the first time, and it is really cool seeing the features of that game make an appearance in Mario Kart. I do also like how the track has 4 different variants for each season, and winter, for example, even plays different with the road being iced over. The layout itself is also fun, but just nothing to really go crazy over. It's one of those fun and simple tracks that is inoffensive, not really much else to say about it. I really wanted to put New York Minute higher on the list because this is an absolutely gorgeous nighttime city track, but I just can't. The track really just plays alright. It has the same sort of problems as a lot of the other Tour City tracks though. And unfortunately this track is just not fun at all on 200cc. I love the swing jazz feel of the music though. It sounds super New York and makes me feel like I'm in the 20s or something. And like I said, visually this is such a cool track to look at. However, it is just unfortunately burdened by the same sort of layout problems that the other city tracks are. Also, why is the Nintendo store not here? Number 66, we got Hyrule Circuit, which is of course our fun little Zelda feature in the game. Visually, this track looks really unique in the game and I liked it quite a bit. The layout is fun, however, that final stretch of the track makes me super uncomfy to play on. I always feel like I'm just gonna lose a race at the last second with how terrifying this part of the track is. I do wish more of the track took place in the castle. I just really like driving through there. Overall, I think the layout is the main reason this is in C tier. It's just nothing really that special. The beginning section is also definitely my least favorite part of the track since it's a little bit boring feeling to play on. Now I am making this video a little bit after Christmas, however why not stay festive? Merry Mountain! I absolutely love this track visually. I love driving through the town section and on this magical railroad. I love the festive sounding music here, it's just so fun. However, once you get to the top of the mountain, this track is just a big long straightaway. No, Nintendo! This was going so well! Like this part isn't bad and it goes by pretty quickly, but it's just such an eye roll moment, especially with how awesome driving up the mountain feels. Finally, closing out our C tier of tracks, we got Daisy Circuit from Mario Kart Wii. There are some things I like better about this remake and some things that I don't. First off, fire music. It's from Mario Kart Wii, so this opinion really shouldn't come out of nowhere. Overall, visually this is a good remake, except for the texture for the road in the city section looking kind of ugly. Compared to the normal road during the tunnel and lighthouse area, the orange gravelly look of this road is really off-putting. I actually do like the change of the water and sky to not being completely orange. I know a lot of people miss the orange look of the original, but I don't really mind it. The area after the tunnel also has some ramps now to make it more fun, and overall I think that this is a net positive over the original. It's still fun to play on, it's just not exceptional or anything. And the other big base game oval track is here with Excitebike Arena at number 63. This one I just barely like over Baby Park though, because I like the music more, I like the retro aesthetic of it more, and we got loads of satisfying ramps. Apparently the formation of the ramps change every lap, which if I did not read this I would have never known that, but that's pretty cool. For this being just a simple oval design, this is definitely my favorite one in the whole game. I feel like using items feels by far the most strategic here compared to Baby Park and Sky High Sundae. I mean, on Baby Park it was just spray and pray, but here it feels a little bit more thought-provoking with how you approach the race. I don't know, I just like this track as a guilty pleasure, hate me if you want for it. Number 62, I got GBA Snowland, which for me was a really sweet remake of the Super Circuit track. Originally, I honestly completely forgot this track existed. Visually, this one looks great. I love the purple aesthetic of the background, it looks awesome. The music is good, although it isn't quite as awesome as some of the other Super Circuit offerings in this game. This layout never really clicked with me in the original version, and here, while it's better, it still isn't mind-blowing or anything. However, with that being said, I still have fun whenever I race on here, great remake. 3DS DK Jungle comes in at number 61, and my opinions here are essentially the same as in Mario Kart 7. Visually, this track looks absolutely incredible, however the road sometimes feels a little bit more jagged, specifically in the anti-gravity section, so I think it evens out. Great track in Mario Kart 7, and once again, it's a lot of fun here. here. Okay, now I may get torched alive for this take, I don't know, but I really think the GBA Sunset Wilds hate is really overblown. Yes, the sun doesn't actively set throughout the race anymore, which sucks, but I really don't think it's as big of a deal as the internet makes it out to be. It also is kind of annoying that part of the minimap got cut out from the original too. With that being said, I still think that this is a top 5 Mario Kart song of all time. I still really like the visuals in this track. I actually think it looks good aside from the sun not setting all 3 laps. And this track is still really fun to play on, especially on 200cc. The road being slippery just adds a fun element to it. I know a lot of people are disappointed with some of the magic from the original being gone, and to an extent I am as well, but I still really like this and have fun playing on it, so I won't hate on the track just to hop on the bandwagon. 3DS Rosalina's Ice World is chocked full of Galaxy references like Starship Mario and the Comet Observatory, which was more than enough reason to put it up here. Jokes aside, this track looks absolutely stunning in this game. I noticed the cave section looks a lot less dark, and to me personally I think it looks great. We also got a new shortcut at the end that requires a mushroom, which can definitely be a tad bit annoying late race, but it's all good. Other than that, it's essentially the same track from Mario Kart 7. I liked it a lot there, and I like it a lot here as well. Coming up next, we got the remake of DK Summit from Mario Kart Wii, and I think it translated over to this game pretty well. At first I didn't really like it, however it has since grown on me. I will say I think that this track works really well on 200cc. Doing the double cut on 200 in this game feels so good. Visually I would say that this is an upgrade from the original, however while it is still good on 150cc, I barely prefer the original in that aspect. Overall I think that this does a really good job at carrying on the Alpine Mountain track that I always loved from Wii. We are finally getting towards the end of the Tour City tracks. Here we got Athens Dash. Aesthetically this one looks completely different from the rest, which helps it so much. The layout is actually fun to go through too. Tricking on the ramps in this one is always so satisfying. But for sake, 200cc on this track is just too much. Literally the only thing stopping this track from being A tier or higher is 200cc. I just cannot handle it. Other than that, this is one of the most fun tracks in the Booster Course DLC. Number 56, we have GBA Mario Circuit. This may be a questionable pick to some, but they put some kind of pixie dust Nintendo magic here for me. This was never a bad track in its original iteration, it was just always very bland. Here this is rectified with the usage of Nintendo's old 60s toy, the Ultra Hand, lifting up the big 180-degree turn. Sure, this is only one turn, but it unironically has the effect of making the rest of the layout way more memorable. Also, visually this one looks awesome. I love the way the trees look in the background, which maybe that's a weird observation, but I just always noticed that. This one just has such a fun layout to drive through. I think if it wasn't just a basic circuit track at the end of the day, I would probably be able to justify putting it higher than B tier. Another GBA track remade in Mario Kart 8 was Cheeseland, and I really like this one. I have seen some people complain about this one since it is a glorified desert track now, and I mean I can kind of see that. It feels completely different from the original just because of how massive of a visual overhaul it is, but to me it is still a lot of fun. It doesn't take away any of the magic of the original like Sky Garden for me, so this doesn't bother me. This one can become somewhat questionable on 200 with how bumpy the road can be, but I really appreciate this remake. I tossed and turned a lot about what to do with the remake of 3DS Rainbow Road. Visually this looks good, but it definitely isn't my favorite. Speaking of visuals, why is the moon so dark? Why? However, the track is really fun to play, just like it was on the 3DS, so there's that. I wasn't all out in love with this track in Mario Kart 7 like other people, and it's the same here, but I certainly can appreciate its role. I love the whole idea of a one-lap Rainbow Road where every lap is completely different. Next up, we have the first track from the entire Booster Course DLC, Tour Paris Promenade. This is such a standout city track, and I hate how little attention this track gets. First off, not all 3 laps are different, which unpopular opinion incoming. I think it's cool for a city track to have a set layout so it isn't complicated. And even then, lap 3 we drive backward, which is a lot of fun since Nintendo rarely does this. Visually, this one also looks pretty lively, and may have those primitive DLC textures, but I really don't mind it. I think it looks great. I don't know, I just really appreciate this track, and I think it's one of the most unique out of the Tour City tracks. I remember I used to really dislike this game's Mario Circuit, but now that I think about it, it's a really good track. Essentially, I felt like this track is what Rainbow Road should have been more like. But driving on this track feels so good. Drifting here feels extremely comfortable, especially on 200cc. I still am not all out in love with the visuals, but I also don't hate it. As far as Mario Circuit tracks go, this is a pretty fun one. Also, the piranha plants here are actually vicious. Like, they amount of times where I've gotten greedy and tried taking a turn too tight where there were piranha plants is crazy. And we have another Mario Circuit track since we couldn't get enough of those in this game, DS Mario Circuit. To be fair, I think that this track was underrated on DS and I think it's even better here. Visually, this is a great remake. I absolutely love the forest section after the pipe. The only reason this is not higher on the list is the final two turns of the track still being excessively brutal, especially on 200cc. It's still a great Mario Kart track, and this definitely feels like the definitive version of this course. And now we got the first track in the entire game, Mario Kart Stadium. This may be a hot take, but I would go as far as to say that this is the greatest intro Mario Kart track of all time. Nintendo could have easily just made this a bland circuit track, but the aesthetic of putting this in a nighttime stadium filled with color is so cool. There are of course fun shortcuts to pull off, which can also be somewhat challenging, a brilliant usage of anti-gravity in order to show it off, and an absolutely fire song. I couldn't put it in A tier since I just like those tracks that much, but this is about as good as an intro beginner-friendly Mario Kart track can get. The remake of Koopa Cape is an interesting case where I think the original track is still slightly better overall, just due to how brilliantly designed the underwater section was, but it is not far behind at all in this game. I went from not liking this remake until I played it for this video, and I finally started to let go of the underwater section, losing its electrical current obstacles, and now I love it for what it is. Visually, this track looks great, especially underwater, and functionally it still plays great too. I find it interesting how the track feels more narrow now too, which I can't decide whether I like it more or not. Overall, good remake, still like 48 tracks in this game more than this though. Number 48, we have GC and DK Mountain, another track that this is now my favorite iteration of this course. First off, this track is absolutely gorgeous visually. The rock texturing on the mountain looks so damn good. I love how the ramps are indented into the mountain too, it's way more satisfying to trick down. I also thought I would hate this track on 200cc with how treacherous the turns are. I did, and that's why it's not in A tier. I love this track so much on 150, which propelled it up to this point, but I also played 200cc a lot, so that mattered quite a bit. Anyway, incredibly fire track, and we finally only have one left to go in B tier. Finally, closing out our B tier, we have GBA Boo Lake. This was yet another Super Circuit track that I completely forgot existed, and it got a massive glow up. Especially considering how disappointed I was in Twisted Mansion, a really good haunted track was definitely in the calling. Now this turn before the underwater section is way too sharp, especially on 200cc, but that is the only main gripe I have with the layout on this one. Making part of the track underwater did wonders for making the track more memorable, since I literally forgot what the layout for this track even was when it got added. With that being said, a great remake, and it is finally time to get to the tracks that I absolutely love with a fiery passion in this game. The impossible happened in the Banana Cup in base game 8 when Nintendo made a good remake of a Super Nintendo track. Donut Plains 3 went from being just another Super Mario Kart grassy track to being absolutely stunning. I love the implementation of underwater. I love how after the underwater there are puddles on the ground too to affect driving. The Mounty Moles don't absolutely obliterate the Racer 2, which, get this, I think that's a good thing. This track is still a lot of fun to drive on in both 150 and 200, so yeah, A tier it is. We never ended up getting a San Francisco track in Mario Kart 8, however Toad Harbor does a good job of filling that role. Between the cable cars acting as obstacles and the steep vertical inclined road, this one takes a lot of inspiration from that real life city. I don't know why tricking over the water at the beginning of the track is so satisfying, but it just is. Also, driving through the market section right after is a lot of fun too. I don't know, this track is just a vibe and it always has been. Sunshine Airport is an absolutely genius theme executed very well, so it gets a very well deserved A tier. This takes the whole airport theme and goes absolutely bonkers with it. This is a really minute detail, but I love how the flight listings are the other tracks in the game. The gameplay itself is really good, but it is just very so slightly too clunky for me to give it S tier. I genuinely love this track, just not to the S tier level. Also, sometimes if you miss the wing of this plane, the track below it doesn't feel fully intuitive, like it is really easy to be put in an awkward position from this. Once again, not dissing the track, it is A tier because I love it, just explaining why I held back from putting it even higher. Nintendo continued the trend in this game with making absolute bangers to end out the Mushroom Cup up in every Mario Kart game. Here there is literally no exception to be found because Thwomp Ruins is such a fire track. I wholeheartedly love the theming here with the ancient ruin aesthetic. I really like the way anti-gravity was designed to slightly add some vary to the way driving feels. The open section in the middle is a lot of fun too, how the road briefly diverges and it gives the racer full control of how they want to handle this section. The Shroomless shortcut at the end would bother me, but it doesn't skip enough to annoy me, plus there is a whole straightaway after it where items can become lethal at the end of a race. I really thought about putting DS Cheap Cheap Beach even higher than I already put it, however I feel like 42 is a really appropriate spot. I mean, if we are talking about retros that feel like the definitive version of their respective tracks, this is a class act example of that. This track is absolutely incredible visually. I would actually want to go and visit here. They even made the jungle section at the end not bland and ugly like it was on DS. All in all, just like a lot of the other retros in this game, this is a really visually stunning one that honors its original version greatly. Now we get into what got the highest ranking in my Mario Kart 64 video, and although it isn't even my favorite track from that game anymore months later, it still got a glorious remake in this game. Now I will be the first to admit that there is a slight issue with this remake. The left bridge route is way too easy in this game to the point where everything else feels kind of obsolete. With that being said, I still have so much fun racing on this track, and the bridge route was the main route I took originally too, so this doesn't bother me too much. I think the beautiful visuals makes up for this when the original track did admittedly look pretty bland. I can't even describe why this track is just so much fun to drift all over the place on, and that off-road shortcut at the end is definitely a big late race game changer. Now we get to a track that I really didn't know what to do with, Ninja Hideaway. There are some real S tier qualities about this one, and some other qualities that I didn't love so much, so it bounces out to a good old A tier. Let's get the negatives out of the way first. Parts of this track feel a little bit too finicky to me. Particularly driving on the roof outside, this section is far from bad, it's just occasionally it can feel a little bit bizarre drifting on here. Now theming wise, this is one of the best Mario Kart tracks of all time. This one is bursting with creativity. This almost feels like a Mario Kart Wii custom track or something, which in my opinion is a good thing. I fully appreciate this track for what it is, and I would love to make another video sometime in the future breaking this one apart because there is so much going on. Grumble Volcano already felt like a game-changing track in Mario Kart Wii, with it breaking apart the track over the 3 laps, and here we get the same thing in glorious HD. I do miss me the rock hop shortcut, but the track itself is just so breathtaking in this game that I don't mind it at all. Not much else to say here that I didn't already say in the Wii video. Great track with a really fun layout. And yet another track that is incredibly creative is Dragon Driftway, originally added in the DLC for the base game. We get to drive through Gobble Gut, which of course is the iconic boss from Super Mario Galaxy 2, and we get this track filled with Chinese theming. This feels like a wonderland for a 150cc drifting course, and it feels amazing in 150cc. The only thing stopping this from being S tier and one of my favorite tracks of all time is 200cc. The turns just don't work properly. It isn't one of the worst 200 tracks by any means, but it definitely doesn't flow perfectly. This track is a little bit linear, but there is enough off-road cuts to stop that from being a significant problem too. I don't know, the abundance of well-designed anti-gravity just makes this one unhealthily fun to play on. Number 37, 3DS Piranha Plant Slide. Yeah, this is one of those retros where it is literally the same thing in this game, and I mean, it was fire originally, so why fix what isn't broken? I really don't know what I could bring up here that I didn't bring up in the Mario Kart 7 video. I mean, the track looks better, but that's a given. 200cc, this track is super chaotic, but aside from those 2 turns in the middle of the track, I think it's really fun. I think that this is a really cut and dry A tier ranking. Now here is a ranking that I never thought I would be making. N64 Choco Mountain makes its way all the way up to number 36. First off, I really like the visuals. No way to really describe why, since this has a very similar cartoony texture style to the rest of Wave 1, I just really enjoy what I'm looking at. My problem with the original track was the layout being really bland, boring, and forgettable, and all of that is fixed. Now the insanely drab middle section of the track is turned into a cave section, which that simple fix adds the dynamics that this track desperately needed, and we get a nice glider ramp going into the boulder section right after. Great remake. If they can make me like this track, then anything in life is possible. Next up, we got our obligatory Bowser's Castle track, ranking very highly on the list. If a Mario Kart game doesn't have Super in the name, then truth be told, it will have a legendarily good Bowser's Castle track in it. First off, I fucking love the rockin' heavy metal theme song, it goes so hard. The layout for the track is good, but I think the fact that I like the previous 4 Bowser's Castles all more is the only reason I am putting this in A tier. There's nothing bad about this layout, it's just I happen to prefer some of the others. Maybe it's nostalgia speaking, I don't know. Although I've been playing this one for 10 years now, so I think that reaches the nostalgia threshold too. I don't know, it's a great track, number 35 it is. Alright, I'm bored, time to piss people off. Bone Dry Dunes at number 34. I am being so serious. I love this track. Everyone else hates it and I love it, and it frustrates me to no end. I get it, the track is bumpy and takes place in a desert theme, get the f over it. The song for this track is my pick for the most underrated piece of video game music, and I will die on that hill. I love this track's theme song so much. And even on 200cc, this track is so chaotic, but it almost feels like an organized chaos. Is that just me wanting to love the track? Probably, but that alone is valid enough for me to put it this high on this list. This is my favorite, everyone hates this track, and I will not apologize for that. And finally, we get to what is the best Tour City track, and seemingly everyone else on the internet agrees as well. I mean, just looking at the visuals, it is so easy to see why this is the case. This track is just jaw-dropping to look at. And layout-wise, there is nothing that offends me here. This truly is the standout Tour City track. Also, the music is fire. I feel like I don't need to point this out every single time at this point. This is just the most lively and fun out of the city tracks. That's all that needs to be said to really warrant this placement. Now, another track that is criminally underrated in its original version, Moonview Highway, gets a glorious glow up in this game. This dug Toad's Turnpike's grave, because in what world does that track even have a pulse when this track is so lively? The cars are also considerably more difficult to avoid in this track. While yes, the original was still harder, it is hard enough in this game for it to not infuriate me. Just a beautiful remake of a Wii track that I already loved, so it all adds up. And next up we have Wii Rainbow Road, which once again, against all odds, Nintendo recaptured the original track's magic. This wasn't my favorite Wii track in the original game, and here I think it's about the same overall, so in comparison to the rest of the tracks in the game, I thought that this was a fair placement. However, I will say thank you for fixing this ramp, which was completely broken in the original game. It actually works properly now. Breaking into our top 30, GCN Sherbet Land. I always enjoyed this track in Double Dash, however here I finally started to appreciate it, both due to the visual makeover and the creative ideas introduced. Here, whenever you fall into water, it doesn't kill you anymore, which solves a lot of the problems of the original track being annoying to drive on, which is great. This track is also super pretty and has great music, blah blah blah. I've seen people still say they don't like this track, and I just really don't get it. I understood in the original version, but here I just feel like the problems with the track have largely been rectified. This is just one of the more fun tracks in the game now. Now, in my opinion, Shy Guy Falls might just be my favorite use of anti-gravity in the entire game. This track was what sold my 10-year-old self so many years ago on how good of a feature anti-gravity was, so it will always hold that special place in my heart. Like, seriously, drive up and down these waterfalls and tell me that this isn't a great track. Aside from that, a lot of the same compliments I have been giving to the other tracks applies here in spades as well. Great music, great visuals, everything. Just all in all, a really fun track. You know, for how remarkably bad Rainbow Road was in Mario Kart 64, the remake of this track is just magical. It took the original, which was way too long, and turned it into a pretty swift one-lap track. Visually, this is the best Rainbow Road in the entire series now, and I don't care what anyone says. While it can still be somewhat simple gameplay-wise, it has a certain charm to it. Especially with the context of the original, driving on this now is just really fun in an unexplainable way. Number 27, we got 3DS Neo Bowser City, another proud member of the Overhated Tracks Club. I always see people bash this track, and I'm so tired of it. I'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room. On 200cc, this track is kind of crazy because of how slippery the road is. Well, honestly, I don't even really mind it that much since you can brake drift. There are other tracks in this game that I find much more unplayable on 200 than this one. Visually, this is one of my favorite tracks in the entire series now. It looks so cool. This is very similar to the 7 version, so a lot of what I would have to say I already mentioned in that video, but this one is easily a personal favorite of mine. Calamari Desert always felt like such an anomaly. It is a track filled with slow turns that you would assume to be annoying to drive on, however they just kind of nail it. What really did it with this remake was making it so lap 2 has you driving on the train tracks and avoiding the train. That was a really neat addition. Simply put, this is a desert track done right. Yes, it's a bland desert theme, but it doesn't feel bland at all. The track has character. Number 25, I got Electrodrome, and I never would have thought of making a Mario Kart track have a rave aesthetic, but after playing this, I am so happy to be living in this timeline. The music in this track is absolutely bumping, definitely one of the best songs in the whole series. Visually, this track is so vibrant. I especially love going on the split path and just looking up at the night sky in the background. I did not expect to be putting my placement of Wii Moo Moo Meadows up this high, but I really just had to. They made this so incredibly beautiful in this game, and it still plays amazingly. I love the cows walking across the road, I love the glider ramp at the end of the track, I love everything about this. Also, they nailed the remaster of this song. Here's another personal favorite from Mario Kart DS, Peach Garden slides in at number 23. So not only is this one another really aesthetically pleasing upgrade, but this is by far the best that this track has ever looked. But now lap 3 also has us driving backward. I think that this was a really good choice for a track to do this with since it feels really natural. I still remember the first time I played this remake and it happened. Once again, just like I talked about in the DS and Wii videos, this is just a really awesome track. And finally, closing out the A tier of tracks, we have the remake of Waluigi Stadium from Double Dash. They made the bold choice of adding these caged areas by the half pipes which can act as a short alternative path, and I like these. They surprisingly don't ruin the visuals of the track at all. They also made the track look way muddier than ever before, and I really like that feature. Other than that, same stuff as before, this was always a really ideal track for drifting and it fits Mario Kart 8 well, enough said. From here on out is the S tier of tracks, what I would consider the elite picks from this game. Super Mario Kart kind of had my least favorite Bowser Castle tracks like ever, and especially Bowser Castle 3 was my least favorite one. In the original game, this was due to the straightaway split apart by 2 walls and how horribly it played with that game's physics and gameplay. But here in Mario Kart 8, they completely turned the narrative around. Not only is this a top tier track visually, but it plays so well. Once again, we have a fire heavy metal rendition of the original song 2, which is awesome. It just plays so flawlessly. This definitely stands as one of the best ones in the whole series now. Kicking off the top 20, we got Dolphin Shoals from base game. You know what's funny is for some reason as a kid I used to f***ing hate this track, and I really don't know why looking back. All the boxes are checked with this one. It has a creative theme since yeah, it's just an underwater track, but now it's themed around dolphins, which gives a character. The music is a jazzy masterpiece, with it having different sections that at the end just explodes with a saxophone solo, and saxophone is one of my favorite instruments too. The track is fun to drive on too. I love the section in the middle where you have a million different choices for how you go through it. And finally, tricking on the eel is super satisfying. And that also leads into maybe my favorite anti-gravity turn in the whole game, with this majestic waterfall surrounding your screen. Now it's time for another remake that feels very similar to the original, but the original was already a masterpiece, so why fix it? DS Tick-Tock Clock. The main changes to this track that I noticed were visually, especially driving through the middle rotating gear section. Now it is surrounded with its own wall design, and I love the enclosed atmosphere of it. I mean, obviously the visuals would look amazing in HD, but it just feels like Nintendo put that extra special magic on this one. And speaking of retro tracks that are exactly the same as the original version, 3DS Music Park. This was already my favorite track from Mario Kart 7, so you really didn't need to reinvent the wheel with this one. I don't know, I have always just loved both the theming and the layout of this track so much. The shortcut at the end over the drum is still just as satisfying to pull off as always. This just drives so well overall. I have seen some people dislike this rendition of DS Wario Stadium, and I just cannot bring myself to not like it. I already thought that this played really well in Mario Kart DS, and that was before tricking was even a feature. Now we got a new anti-gravity section that leads us into a little underwater section to end the track off, and it never personally bothered me at all. Maybe it didn't click with some other people, I don't know. There definitely is a hint of some good old personal bias in there. I just always loved this one. Wario's Gold Mine from Mario Kart Wii comes on in at number 16, and man, this track is gorgeous. I already really enjoyed this track in Wii, but I always thought that the random clips in the road could be a bit janky, especially for new players. Thankfully, the anti-gravity feature of Mario Kart 8 was the perfect ailment for this, making it flow very naturally now. At first I was upset that anti-gravity made it so the shortcut was very easy to do, but the shortcut doesn't really save much time anymore, so that doesn't bother me much. Congrats Wario's Gold Mine, S tier for you. And now it is time for what I believe to be the definitive version of Mushroom Gorge. I am sure that will ruffle some feathers in the Mario Kart Wii community, let me explain. The track is more fun in Mario Kart Wii if you are an experienced player, but it is way more glitchy and unforgiving there. Here it is still loads of fun, but it is just much more polished as well, so for actual races, I think it flows better. Also, visually, this is a really good remake of the original. I like how the left side of the cave also keeps the blue glider mushroom from Mario Kart 7, just all in all, this is a really good remake. Putting Super Mario Galaxy as the song in a Mario Kart track is a surefire way to make me like it, and what do we know, this is the case with Cloud Top Cruise. Jokes aside, the track itself is a lot of fun too. This makes GBA Sky Garden feel even more soulless too because of how much better this one looks. The clouds look super pretty to drive on, and once you get into the thunderstorm section, I love the dynamic of having to quickly react to which boost panels you can drive over since there is constantly lightning striking. And of course, the shortcut at the end of the track over the leaves is great since it isn't as easy to do as some of the other Shroomas cuts in this game. Time for another definitive retro track in this game. Daisy Cruiser was perfected here. I love how all the walls are just bursting with color and personality now. It wasn't bad originally or anything, but I much prefer it here. Also, the dining room actually has people eating in it now instead of just being empty tables sliding everywhere. Even the little underwater room looks way better now, although I never take it so I never would have really noticed that. I don't know, it just feels like a massive standout here in 8 Deluxe. For years I have talked about Waluigi Pinball being a slightly overrated track, and it finally clicked with me making this video how good of a track it is. First off, the music is absolutely perfect for this track. It fits so well. Visually, this is a stunning remake. There is color just popping at you from everywhere. And the problems with this track feeling linear are rectified with the ending section giving you a bit of choice with how you drive it. There are pinballs coming at you, so you can either be brave and go down the middle or take a more careful approach. I apologize to the Waluigi Pinball community, I hope you all can forgive me. A lot of the great things about Sunshine Airport feel like they are being done even better in Super Bell Subway, and I like the way this track plays even more. First off, I love how once again the different stations are the track names, very creative. The music here is even more fire than Sunshine Airport, which I already like the loungy feel of that one. Dodging the subways really demands you to stay engaged with the track, especially on 200cc. I love how they put glider ramps off to the sides too to allow you to play it safe if you want. I also love how there's graffiti everywhere on the walls as a nice decoration. This is just a stellar addition to the game. Finally breaking open the top 10, we got Mute City. F-Zero fans were yearning for a new F-Zero game, and Nintendo said no, but we will give you a Mario Kart track or two, and thankfully they were great. The idea to make it so you can get coins from the panels off to the sides was a brilliant implementation and called back to the original game beautifully. As for the gameplay, it is very fast paced, which is exactly what an F-Zero track should feel like. This is easily my favorite track in the whole game to play on 200cc. The shortcuts feel amazing in 200, especially that ending floaty feeling one. Now bringing it back to stellar retro remakes, GCN Yoshi Circuit. Finally, I don't need to complain about the cave shortcut being removed. Yeah, it was iconic, but now we can shroom through the Piranha Plant area, which is a good substitute. Visually, this is the best this track has ever looked, and all the turns are fun to drift around both on 150 and 200cc. Just a good remake. I don't know what else there is to say that I didn't say before. Now we get to my favorite track from Mario Kart Wii, and once again, it's my favorite Wii track in this game as well. I think overall, this is a good visual upgrade from the original. I mean, it already looked great on Wii, but it definitely feels a lot more polished, especially the Wiggler area in the middle. They got rid of the wavy bridge again, which is a tiny bit disappointing to me, but I have learned to accept that since Mario Kart 7. It's still Maple Treeway in all its glory. I am perfectly fine with all this. It's a great track. Taking place in a bathroom is a bit of a bizarre concept for a track, and yet is pulled off seamlessly in squeaky clean Sprint. I was not ready for Nintendo to pop off with this track, and yet they did, and it's great. The music is one of the best in the whole game. Everything is fun to drive through and look at, and there's so many creative little ideas thrown in. Like, look at the Goomba floating on the floaty, it's so cute. Just everything about this track is fun. It's fun to look at, and it's fun to drive through, plain and simple. As soon as I saw Yoshi's Island announced for Wave 4 the Booster Course DLC, I just knew this was going to be one of my favorites. And lo and behold, it is. This track is just so pretty to look at. It's still great to drive on too, but the visuals are the big standout. Especially once you get up to the cloud area, it just looks so good. I love how when you are gliding, if you hit the flying Yoshi egg, a path will open up, which is super satisfying to drift on and cuts a whole turn. Thankfully, it is really hard to hit the Yoshi egg too since it's flying all over the place. I love that addition. I was not ready to love the remake of Riverside Park from Mario Kart Super Circuit as much as I do in this game, but this is one of the prettiest things I've ever laid laid my eyes upon. Driving through the waterfall after the cave area is all I need to showcase for that. It is incredible. I used to like Lakeside Park slightly more in Super Circuit, but this remake just feels perfect for Riverside Park. It was a track that I always forgot about in its original version, but it was remade with a new magic to it. Now we got our other F-Zero rendition in this game, Big Blue. This one is a long one-lap extravaganza, which is the biggest reason it gets the slight notch over Mute City. We get more of the extremely unique physics, allowing for crazy shortcuts, which as a Mario Kart Wii guy, I love. I miss whenever tracks just had crazy stuff like this going on. You always need a few of these in the game. I also think this one has better music and visuals than Mute City ever so slightly, so there is also that. This just feels like an epic in the form of a Mario Kart track, and another example of that is next at number 3. Mount Wario is in my opinion the greatest one-lap track in Mario Kart history. This truly feels like an experience more so than a track. The first lap has us going down a steep mountainside with crazy icy turns, and this part of the track is gorgeous. The second lap takes us to an icy cave and over a dam, and we also go through this absolutely treacherous forest area. Like, this part is actually terrifying. And lap 3 is majestic. We race down an Olympic course to the finish line. This track is just so intense, but it feels and looks amazing. At number 2, we have the greatest retro track in Mario Kart history, and I am not leaving that up to discussion, GBA Ribbon Road. It's stupid how good this looks. It already looked good in Super Circuit and Nintendo just went balls to the walls. Now we are in a child's room with the track being their own creation. I fucking love this concept. The turns just feel as good as ever to go through, and half of the track is made up of a wavy road, which I really like. There are some tricky shroomless cuts here too, which pose a really good risk versus reward situation. However, this is still not my favorite track in the entire game. Yeah, that honor goes to Wild Woods. This track is by far, and it isn't even close, the prettiest track in the entire series. The track wouldn't have made it all the way up to number 1 alone on the merit of the visuals, but thankfully everything else is great too. The music fits the track flawlessly, the track is fun and exciting on both 150 and 200, and the concept is creative. I love this whole drifting through the forest thing that's got going on. It's so magical and relaxing at the same time. I just love everything about this track, and it makes a strong case for my favorite Mario Kart track of all time. And, well, with all that being said, that is my ranking of all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I know this was a super long one, and hopefully a good conclusion to this Mario Kart retrospective series, and once again, like I said in the retro, hopefully this isn't the end of the retrospective and I can make it again for the next game, but we'll just have to wait and see. Be sure to scold me in the comments and let me know where my list inevitably went wrong, because I'm sure I'll enjoy that. And as always, hope you have a great rest of your day, and peace out.